Hello, it's Paul Driscoll here, aka the Drisk from the RGDS podcast, and I thought it'd be fun to do my own personal top 20 Amiga public domain game list, as I think these games are often forgotten about. Many people have never heard of them or given access to, and it's a real shame because there's some real gems locked away that need to be played by more. Now, before we begin, I better explain what I mean by public domain games. You see, I'm using it as a collective term. I realise that there's free, there's public domain, there's shareware, licenseware, and also given on magazine cover discs, maybe even as an exclusive. But I'm lumping this all together. I mean, in essence, what I mean is something that was distributed by either public domain houses like 17-bit or on cover discs. And really, this was the indie scene back in the day. Now, for a teenager, even though I had full access to, X-copy that floppy sort of commercial games, I still was drawn to these wonderful, essentially indie titles. You see, it was great and refreshing to see these games which was done by an individual full of imagination and wonder. Often they were doing variants of classic games and embellishing it or tweaking it in certain ways to make it stand out. And I love that because, for a lot of these games, to be honest, some of these were the first time I'd ever played really the arcade game. I mean, this is before we had things like MAME, so, to suddenly be able to access games like this in the home was truly wonderful. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, this is a personal list of games that I've chosen, and it comes mostly from nostalgia and what I personally love to play. So let me know what you would have chosen. I'd really be interested to know, and, don't get too upset if I've missed off your particular favourite. Remember, this is a personal list, and really the purpose of this, the thing that I would love to see is, if you've watched this, perhaps get an Amiga emulator, find these public domain games and give them a go yourself, because I think a lot of people like me love that voyage of discovery and discovering new games, and particularly to some of our American listeners, they won't have a Scooby with a lot of these games, and likewise are people of a different age group to myself, because there really was a finite window with the Amiga. Really, it's people younger than me by a couple of years probably went down the console path because SNES and Mega Drive had got so much more popular at that point. So give these games a go and see what you think. Anyway, let's start with the number 20, my 20th choice. Obviously I'll be counting down to my number 1 choice, and I've chosen Salmon Pink Max. Now actually I knew this probably better as Biplanes. That was the one that came on cover disc, but I've chosen Salmon Pink Max because it's the same game, but it has the ability to play against a computer, whether Biplanes was only able to play against another human player. Now, to be honest, it needs to be played by another human player. It's like all duel-based sort of one-on-one arena fighters. It's no fun if you're just beating the computer, really, but it's nice that you do have the option to do computer and AI and hone your skills, although they are blimmin' tough, the AI. Now, Salmon Pink Max was made by Peter Mason, and it was released in 1990, so quite early on, really. And it's based on the very little known Mattel Intellivision game called Biplane. That's what its sort of inspiration. And this was so much fun to play back in the day, with you doing loop-the-loops and taking out the enemies. It's essentially combat, just the plane section, but with gravity. You're having to worry about gravity. One of the cool things was that you could stall your plane, do a dive, and then pull yourself up at last minute to take out the enemy. Very, very good fun. Loop the loop, shouting at your opponent. I just adore this, and I played it for so many hours, and it's just a shame that it's very difficult to find another human player to play it today. So moving on, and for my number 19th choice, I have gone for a fun platformer called Eric. This was made in 1992 by Confused Pelican developer. Basically, it's a David Parsons game. He also made Trog, he made Og, not the arcade game Trog, I hasten to add, the Amiga game Trog, Og, and Morton Strikes Back. He's a great indie developer back in the day. Now, technically, this was F1 licenseware, which was you basically paid a distributor who would copy the game and and print on demand really, and send you the disc. And it was going for quite a pricey sum of £7.99. Particularly, it was published very shortly by Atlantis, so it did actually get a box, but Atlantis went bankrupt pretty quick, and therefore, sadly, it didn't progress. And it's a shame because it didn't get seen by more. Because Eric is really a delightful game. It's got gorgeous hand-drawn artwork, and I guess it's not based on the movie Eric the Viking, but he is Eric and he is a Viking. And it's just simple. You're grabbing the keys and you make your way to the door, but it just shows you the level of quality that one individual coder was able to achieve back in the day. Yeah, really, really special game. Right, okay, let's go on to number 18. And I've chosen Giddy 2, Hero in an Eggshell. Now, this was released in 1994, and it's a sequel to Wibble World Giddy. And it has you play Giddy with big, I don't know whether they're foam hands or they're real hands or whatever, but that's basically almost like Dizzy but with big foam hands. And I love this game. It's got bright, bold colours. It's got loads of humour in the background from the radioactive sheep and things. The puzzles, they're okay. I mean, it's not to the level of some of the better Dizzy games, but it's still huge amount of fun. It's made by Phil Rushton, and obviously, as I mentioned, it is inspired by the Dizzy games. But I love this. You play Giddy going off to stop an alien invasion and make your way through. And interestingly, the music, which is only labelled up as the Demon, is actually Alistair Brimble. That's why the music is so good. So yeah, really, really good public domain game. Okay, so we move on to number 17, and I've chosen a real big hitter actually. People are probably quite shocked it's so low down on my list, but it's Llamatron 2112, which was released in 1991 by Jeff Minter. Yes, he of Tempest 2000 fame, and a very, very famous individual. Now, he did quite a few games on the Amiga, but for me this was his best. I mean, the Galactic Llamas, or whatever it was called, Revenge of the Camel and things like that, they were all right, but this one is the one that really stuck with me. It's essentially a single stick version of Robotron 2084, but instead of rescuing humans, you're rescuing sheep and llamas from the alien hordes. It's full of imagination, it's got loads of variety to the sprites, and it's just addictive as hell, and a pure joy to play. I mean, you can't beat Jeff Minter for gameplay. And it was great value as well. I mean, this was a shareware. It cost £5, but to be honest, you could have the disc and it was free. The £5 really just got you a thank you and a poster from him. It didn't give you any extra features. But yeah, no, this is well worth giving a go today. It still holds up fantastically well. Right, let's go on to number 16, and I've chosen Deluxe Pac-Man. Now, this was released in 1992 with an AGA version appearing in 1995. AGA was more colour chip, but you got the 1200. This is a fabulous update to the Pac-Man game by Edgar M. Vigdal. And he did also Deluxe Galaga, which I'm sure might come up again. And he also did Tetris with a Z. He also did the follow-on to Deluxe Galaga called Warblade, which is what he carried on the Windows and Macintosh and mobile phones. Most recently, he actually did Vector Blade on the Vectrix, so that was released in 2020. So it's lovely that he's still producing games. But back to Deluxe Pac-Man, and this appeared in public domain and also was on Assassin's Disc 41 compilation. Now, for those who don't know, the Assassin disc compilations are just wonderful public domain compilations where they somehow managed to squeeze in multiple games on one disc, and it was a really efficient way of gaining access to all these PD games. But I adore Deluxe Pac-Man because it comes up with it's not just a clone or anything, it's doing its own thing. It comes up with loads of ideas to make it sort of fun and compelling, and it's got big power-ups, and there's invisible mazes later on. It's got so much variety, and that's what I love, is every map is just something fresh and new. And of course you've got those big bold sprites which are very, very cool as well. So yeah, I think it needs to be played by more, and I think hopefully by seeing the graphics you might be inspired to try it. Okay, so let's go on to number 15, and I've chosen Alien Bash 2. Now this came out really late on the Amiga. It came out in 1996 and it's done by Glenn Cummings and Miles Jeffrey. Now they shamelessly nicked the graphics of Chaos Engine here, and the sound effects are definitely ripped from another bitmap game called Gods. But nevertheless, it's a fun blaster that has you run around just shooting the aliens and making your way. It's very, very cool. Whilst the original game, Alien Bash, appeared on the cover disc of the one in 1993, which was inspired by Alien Breed by Team 17, this sequel appeared on Amiga format issue 83, and a lot of people missed out on it because 1996, and that's late in 1996, it just passed a lot of people by. But I do find there's a certain charm to this laissez-faire attitude to copyright, and the fact they just nicked all the things but still made a really good game. And the game that they made is actually quite unique. They weren't like doing too much copying from it, just using the sprite resources and sound effects. Anyway, let's go on to number 14, and I've chosen another David Parson game, which is Og with an exclamation mark. Now it was released in 1992, and it's essentially Wonder Boy, where you play a caveman and you have to, that's Wonder Boy the arcade game, so it's sort of like, you're making your way through. It's not fixed scrolling like that, but it's the same idea. You collect fruit, pick up the axe, the stone axe, and it's difficult, it's rock hard, but it's so addictive, and it's so beautiful with the bright and colourful graphics that it just keeps you wanting to play. I mean, I immediately became, taking footage from this, I became addicted again, and it still holds up. I had to literally pull myself away to try and cover some of the other games. Right, okay, so should we go on to the next game, and that is number 30. And talking of tough platformers, then you got to try Hoi Remix, released in 1993, that was a AGA tweaked version that was the actual public domain of Hoi, released in 1992. You see, they did actually release Hoi commercially, but the company went bankrupt, and they decided instead to release a modified version that was AGA, so A1200 with better colours, as a licenseware, and that's the one that we're playing here. And you can see you're playing a cute little dino, and you've got to traverse the infested worlds, and my word, this is tough. I mean, you have no weapons, you're armed only with nothing but a jump. I mean, it's no wonder the dinosaurs became extinct here, because this is one tough mother. Yeah, I mean, modern platformers, eat your heart out. You think Super Meat Boy is tough? Try this for size. But you do get better as you learn and play through. And one of the good things with the remix version is that you can tick the trainer. It's built into the game. You see like a menu at this one, so not only can you skip to each level that you want, but you can tick the trainer and it gives you infinite lives, and that works so well in this game because you always feel there's some progression, because when you get to the next checkpoint you'll always start at that point, so it really, you don't get too disheartened because you're slowly making your way through. Yeah, I mean, it's done by I think the Belgian developers. Rainer van Ville did the game along with Clockwiser, and he did the music bizarrely on Bump and Burn. Same like the artist who worked on this also did those same games. But it's quite a big game really. It's got 5 huge levels. The levels are massive, and it's just a joy to play, so definitely one I would recommend. Right, let's go on to number 12, and I've chosen Tetris Pro, released in 1993 by Cash. This is a Tetris clone, as I mentioned, but the reason I like this version is it's got awesome music. I love that every level that you clear draws a background picture, so that's really what you're building towards, is to make the background picture, and you'll go on to the next stage. So it gives you that sense of progression which works so well. It includes things like bonuses and explosions, so if you have like a bomb symbol, and you can actually make a line at that point, you'll blow everything up on that level, which is a great way to sort of progress. This appeared on issue 35 of Amiga Power, and incidentally I was reading up on it, and Stuart Campbell, who was like one of the reviewers of Amiga Power, he apparently has achieved level 78 and 500 lines. So if you want a challenge, that's one to beat because that's a damn fine score. Right, okay, so shall we go on to number 11? And I've gone for Cave Runner. Now this appeared on one of my favourite compilations of all time actually, which was the Assassin #1 compilation, which had so many of the games that are on my list. I mean, I adored, and that's probably where my nostalgia kicks in, because I had this Assassin's compilation and therefore played to death a lot of these games. But as you can probably see, Cave Runner is a really nice, bright, bold and colourful Boulder Dash clone, but it adds a lot of more. There's explosions, it tries to do lots of clever things. Yes, I know Emerald Mine and a few others would be probably better ones, and in the same way, like actually with the last one instantly, Tetris Pro Super Twintris is probably one that people would choose because that has more multiplayer elements. But no, with Cave Runner, I stick with this particular one. It's the one I have nostalgic feels with, and I think it's really polished and well done. So let's go on to number 10, and for this I've chosen Adventures of Quick and Silver. Now this was released as an exclusive game to a magazine, and I think it was Dutch or German, I can't really tell by looking at the language, but it's called Amiga Fun. It's certainly not a magazine I was ever aware of in the UK, but it came out in 1991. And what this is, it's actually a fun platformer, but it's got a lot of people behind Factor 5. You know, you've got Peter Theroff on coding, who did, of course, Mega Turrican, Legend of K, Apidia, and you've also got Frank Matzke on graphics, who did Turrican, Mega Turrican, Gem-X, Apidia, and Super Turrican. And of course you have Chris Hulsbeck on music. He probably needs no introduction if you're watching this video, but he's the guy that did all the Turrican music, Great Guiana Sisters. He's just a total genius, one of the best game musicians of all time. But what I love with this, they're just having a laugh with it. I mean, it's full of completely ripped off characters. There's like a sort of drawn character that's obviously Bubble, or there's Sonic appears in it, and they're just having a laugh. I mean, the game's not that great really, but it's one that it always makes you smile, because you're like, well, what copyright infringement are they going to do next? I mean, they obviously knew they were doing wrong, because apart from Chris Hulsbeck, they all did aliases of like sort of spins of the names of Bitmap Brothers and things like that. So yeah, it just makes me smile. So yeah, definitely another one to give a bit of time with and see what you think. Right, okay, so we've reached number 9, and for this I've chosen the really cool Diddle in Space shooter. Now this is a sequel to Diddle in Wonderland, which was incidentally released in 1992, and the sequel came out in 1994, but it's a different beast here. It's a really gorgeous blaster. You basically run around the arena level, a bit like Bubble, but with a bit of sort of scrolling, and just take out all the enemies, and once you do, you progress, and there's lovely sort of horizontal shooting sections as bonus, like shooting the asteroid fields, etc. This was licenseware. I mean, they only wanted £3.99, including post and package. I mean, they weren't trying to rip you off here, and it's a really polished, awesome game. It's got amazing music. It's made by Darren Ithell, hence why it's Diddle in Space, and it's just a fun, great blast. I love the power-ups. I mean, you feel so good when you pick up those damn power-ups, or those floating fruit, although they're difficult to get. It's still just really, really solid, and what a great game. Now, he went on, Darren Ithell, to do the Fun School games, or edutainment games, but he also worked on the Click and Play and Game Factory game development kits, which are very, very cool. So it's nice that he went on to do some work in those fields as well. Now on to number 8, and I've chosen Motorola Invaders 2, released in 1993. Yes, you're hearing it, it's Metallica Sad But True on loop. I mean, this was amazing, really. It was only an AGA title. You can see with that bright popping colours. The idea is these are viruses, and you're a virus killer, and you just have to shoot all the enemies. But what I think works so well, and I personally have never ever seen this in a shooter. I think it's a mechanic that should be done with more. The enemies don't shoot at you, but what happens is when you shoot them dead, they don't just explode, they actually fall down. So that's where the shooting comes from. There's like hundreds of enemies, all drawn with that beautiful sort of like doodle of characters. And yeah, it's just really compelling. And I love how they mix it up. You know, I mean, every level offers something new and different, whether it's like a big doodle aliens that break down into lots of chunks, or different patterns. And of course, like Space Invader, you have to shoot them before they get invade, reach the bottom of the screen, which can happen quicker than you think. But made by Martin Rebus, he also did a Pengo clone called Pengo on the Amiga as well. But really solid game. I think a lot of people would have fun with that. Right, okay, let's go on to my number 7 choice, and I've chosen Tanks. It's also known as Amiga Tanks, you might see it as, and it was released in 1991. And yes, it's another one that was on that Assassin Disc number 1 compilation, which I love so much. In fact, I think pretty much every game that's on that compilation is on my list. I guess it's a nostalgic feels. But this is really solid. It's made by Gary Roberts, and it's basically just a simple tank shooter. You sort of work out the speed, you work out the power, and you try and shoot the other tank before they shoot you. It just works quite well. Now, Gary Roberts, he actually ported John Madden and Desert Strike to the Amiga from the Mega Drive, and he's gone on to be a really big deal as a producer. I mean, loads and loads of games he's produced over the years, but the GameCube Resident Evil Part 4 is one that he had involvement with, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I just like the basic nature of Tanks. Because unlike other ones, I mean, probably a lot of people would choose scorched tanks, and I can understand why. I mean, you've got different weapons, different shields and everything, but I find it overly complex. Me and my friends, the reason we liked Tanks, it had those great speech effects, and it was just fun, and it was one you could pick up and play and be done and dusted. I find Scorched Earth, you got to think too much, but that's probably just me. Most people choose Scorched Tanks as one of their favourites. Right, okay, so let's go on to the 6th choice, and I've gone for Super Obliterator, released in 1993 and mixing in Pang with Turrican essentially. You're having to destroy all the asteroids on the level and you proceed. It really is a total blast, and very few people have heard of this gem. It deserves to be played by more. And if you're thinking all that music's good, I think it is lifted from other games, but it is Born Lin. Of course, he did some of the music on Project X, Quack and Worms, so yeah, it's cool that he's, whether officially or not, his music's in this game as well. Now let's go on to number 5, and I've chosen an Amos basic written game called Extreme Violence. Now, it came out in 1993 by Simon Green, and to look at it you're probably thinking, I've lost the plot, but despite its basic look, it is an amazing update to combat. Instead of like tanks or vehicles, you're just wandering around. It's got a split screen, so you can each see your section, and there's like a radar where you can try and get a sense where the other person is. It's got loads of power-ups, and the amount of hours that me and my friends used to put into this. I mean, it's another one that I find sad that I very seldom can play this multiplayer, because most people don't have the nostalgic feels that I know of this game, so probably be less interested. And yeah, I just love this. I mean, I love the fact that it's randomly generated, so you never run out of, it's this level. You never know what is going to be where really until you do it. So yeah, definitely one that I would recommend. Now, incidentally, later versions also gave CPU controlled players, although you can't really beat playing against a human player. That's what it was intended for. But until you've had that, like where you're running rings around each other trying to shoot the other one, it's just hilarious. Add beer and you're in for a good night. Yeah, really good game, one that I definitely recommend. So we're on to number 4 already, and I've chosen another game on the Assassin Volume 1 PD compilation, which as I mentioned, it's got to be one of the best PD game compilations, maybe even game compilations. It's up there with one of the best. And this is the game Rollerpede. I adore this. It's an update to Centipede. It was released in 1994. It came out on Amiga Power issue 11, and I know it also appeared on one of the earlier Amiga Computing as well, because you used to get good PD games. This is just so polished, really. It's got great music, great sound samples, but it's a kick-ass gameplay. I mean, I love Centipede, and just the idea where they've made it full widescreen, and you just sort of like run around, do the shooting, get the power-ups. The bouncing spiders gives you power-ups, and yeah, it's just really, really solid. Such a great update, and needs to be played by more. Right, let's go on to number 3, and I've chosen Deluxe Galaga, released in 1993, and this is another Edgar M. Vigdal, he of Deluxe Pac-Man fame. And this takes the idea of Galaga and elements of Gapless and Galaga 88 and throws them all together in some sort of one hodgepodge hot pot, and it's just great because he comes up with so much variety. I mean, I love every level offers something new, and it's also polished with amazing music, and it's really generous as well. It's got 75 levels, distinctly different levels, so it'll keep you going forever, really. Now, incidentally, Edgar, he did carry on making this game on the PC and Mac, but decided to drop Galaga because he'll probably get sued, and instead has called it Warblade. So I think he stopped developing a long time ago. I know his website's gone, but you might be able to find Warblade and play that as well. Very, very cool. Right, okay, we're on my second choice, the penultimate, and I have gone for the amazing Pater style game called Drip, released also in 1993 by Art Skiles. Now in the game you play a cool shade wearing Drip, and you must rust all the pipes, make them collapse, and then you can progress to the next level. It's just such an polished, I mean, if you saw this in the arcade, you would believe, I'd be quite happy to believe that this was an arcade game. It looks gorgeous, plays gorgeous, so much variety to the level, and I really like the fact that the art styles, the guy who developed it, Art Skiles, he didn't actually want anything. All he asked for, that if you enjoy the game, give $5 or the equivalent, so for us £5 to charity. That's all he wanted. Choose your local charity and give if you like the game. And you've got to admire someone like that. This is such a polished arcade game. I can't stress how cool, fun this is. Definitely needs to be played by more. Right, okay, we've reached my number 1 choice, and for this I have chosen Alien Fish Finger. This came out really late in 1995, but it's one that I've really grown to love. It's a sort of zoomed out run and gun exploration game, and you've got to find all the glowy objects to progress or whatever. It just plays so well. I mean, it was a shareware game. They were only asking £4, like one-off payment, which I think is pretty good, really. And yeah, it just is a lot of fun. It's got bits of humour. I love the way that you can shoot the alien head off. You got the big sort of like space hopper bouncing alien, and I can't stop playing this game. It is a real favourite of mine, and every time I go back to it, I adore it. So there you go. That was my top 20 Amiga public domain games. Now, I'll be the first to admit I could have listed hundreds more. I mean, there's so many that I'll give a couple of honourable mentions. There's the fantastic light bike racer called Sneech. You've got a really solid shooter called T-Racer, like Tracer, but T-Racer. There's a really cool, amazing cool, actually, this probably should have made my list, called Transplant. It's sort of like an overhead shooter of the enemy, so addictive. And then, of course, you've got things like Mega Ball and Babonoid. Mega Ball is really, really cool. Bat and ball game, and same with Babonoid, is also sort of like bat and ball but with images, nothing too rude or anything, but cool for teenage boys, and that's just some. I mean, I could have mentioned so many others. I mean, they've got great dungeon crawlers and things, but instead what I'm going to do, if you've enjoyed this, I mean, the whole purpose of this was to get and encourage people to try some of these games. That would mean a lot to me if you just tried some of these games yourself and see what you think, because I think these deserve to be played. You can play them with an emulator. Reach out to me. I'm quite happy to help you set these up. I actually use for a lot of these either Amiga Forever, which is admittedly a bought emulator, but it is good in that it does all the hard work for you. It's quite nice. You just drag the ADFs or handful of ADFs on there, because a lot of these games, because they're public domain, do not appear in WHD downloads, unfortunately. And I find that PUAE, which is the one used in that I used in sort of like a RetroArch. Some of these games don't work, which is why I tended to do. But to be honest, you don't need to pay for Amiga Forever it's all done for you. You can get WinUAE and find the Kickstarters. And as I say, I'm always happy to give you some pointers to get it right if you want it. So anyway, that was my choices. If you had an Amiga, I'd love to hear your choices. Any ones you felt I should have included, purely because I'd be interested to see, or I'm always about discovering new games. But the last thing I want to really shout out is there's an amazing book called The Ultimate Guide to Amiga PD Games. Now, it's done by Christian Clark, and it's only £1.50 digitally, and it's such a well-researched, labour of love book. He's managed to get lots of interviews with developers. I never hear people in the retro community talk about it, because I guess it's quite an obscure book, but definitely one that gets double thumbs up from me. I'll put a link in the show notes if you wanted to buy it. But I mean, that is full of so many other games. So if you've tried these games that I've perhaps suggested, or like what you see, and curious what other games are out there, because there's such a vast library of these public domain games. And that's even before you look at the Amiga demos and things like that. The demo scenes of really cool things. But yeah, this book is quite comprehensive. It has a lot more, and really well researched. So yeah, give it a go. And if you do, like as always, if you enjoyed this, click like, consider subscribing, and even just commenting. This is a new fledgling YouTube channel. We're trying to get it off the ground. It's so difficult these days, and there's so much competition. We've got no big ideals, but it'd be nice if a few more people sort of like watch the videos. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, and one of the ways you could really help with doing that is giving a like and even commenting, because I think engagement makes YouTube push it to more people, as I understand it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. As I say, you can reach out on the RGDS Discord channel. Consider also, we do a free podcast. So I incidentally, all of this is quite unique actually compared to a lot of other podcasts and things, and I'm not saying that as any criticism, but we take the stance of just doing it all totally for free. That's not taking anything away from any of the other podcasters, but we do it just purely because we want to keep it fun. But yeah, please, just have a listen to our podcasts. I'm trying to put them on YouTube as well, although we're better known on audio. We're quite well established, get quite good listener numbers there, but with YouTube we're still working on it. Anyway, love going through these classic games, and hope to hear from you soon. So until next time, keep it retro.